We can go directly to the French presidential elections. The runoff takes place, as everybody knows, this coming Sunday between free market centrist Emmanuel Macron and far-right Marine Le Pen. As there is now an obvious question, has the anti-immigration rhetoric and the expression of hostility recurrent in Le Pen's speeches been a key factor, according to you, likely to sway the vote decisively?
Well, I don't think it's likely to sway the vote decisively, but if we compare what her father did in 2002 when he was in the second round, in the runoff against Jacques Chirac, he totaled 17% of the votes. And, all estimates show that she will at minimal double this amount, and many people think that she may score some 40% of the vote. So in the meanwhile, France has changed, unemployment has worsened, the plight of the French worker has been worse, something which may be comparable to what's boosted Trump's victory in America. But I believe that not only the anti-Muslim rhetoric of Mrs. Le Pen, but the fact that France had to suffer 240 dead since the attack on Charlie Hebdo in January 2015 until the very last attack on the Thursday preceding the first round of the election on Champs-Élysées, all conducted by terrorist jihadists. And therefore, the extreme right has tried to sort of mix jihadist terrorism with the presence of Muslims in France, and trying to use that as a means to sort of push xenophobic votes, particularly amongst people in France who lost their jobs because they were outsourced and thought that the little jobs that remained were taken by people from immigrant descent who would accept a lower wage.
But the anti-immigration argument didn't probably have the impacts that might have been expected, especially by the National Front in the first round, as Marine Le Pen came second to Emmanuel Macron. Do you think it will become a factor for the second round voting?
Well, I believe the main issue was what happened in the first round from that point of view, because, pollsters and pundits had been predicted for more than a year that she would come first at the first round, and that, what was left for the mainstream candidates was to fight for the second place. And Macron, made the prowess of coming first with close to 4 points difference, which is not much. I mean, not little. 20 something against 24 point something. And so one of the reasons why that happened, I believe, is that jihadists failed in their attempt to take the French elections hostage. Because had we had a continuity of attacks like we had between January 2015 and July 2016, when we had 239 people who died, from Charlie Hebdo to the kosher supermarket in Paris, then the attack on the Bataclan Music Hall in November 2015, and finally the attack on Bastille Day celebrations in Nice and the French Riviera in July 14, not to mention the stabbing of a number of people, the last one being Father Jacques Hamel in Normandy on the 26th of July. Had that tragedy continued, it would have been far more difficult to maintain the extreme right in its present amount of votes, which was 1/5 of the electorate, I mean, of the voters at least, in the first round. But, I think the jihadists fails on that for a number of reasons. The first one being that the so-called Islamic State territory, or Caliphate territory, is under threat because it is being attacked, bombed on a daily basis. You cannot cross the border anymore. You cannot get into. You cannot get out. That makes a difference. They're trying to save their neck, And, they don't have much time to plot for attacks in Europe or in France or in the West. And the main coordinator of the attacks, a French guy from Algerian descent called Rachid Qassem, was drowned in February, and therefore he was inactive. He was the one who had threatened many of us and condemned many of us to death. So he's now out of the way. And therefore, also, I believe that French intelligence made significant progress in, breaking the codes and tapping the telephone system, the messenger services, and therefore many projects that have been planned were foiled, and a number of people arrested since July 2016 until now.
In your book, you provide a comprehensive background to the different phases of Islamic radicalism in France, but obviously you leave out the current presidential campaign and the election itself. But you have a chapter called From Muslim Voting to the Muslim Vote in the English version. Now, given the fact that in France one cannot ask respondents who take part in service to mention their religion, can we really speak of a Muslim vote?
Well, pollsters can ask people whether they identify as Muslims, as Catholics, as young workers, gay, left, right, and whatever. So the census does not allow you to ask people, but a private institution can. And what was very striking was that Hollande in 2012 got something like 80 to 90% of the votes of people who said they were Muslims, which was huge. And Hollande won by a very narrow majority. So hadn't French voters who define themselves as Muslim not mobilized en masse for him, he probably may not have won. This is now completely different because many people who call themselves Muslims were antagonized by the gay marriage laws. And therefore, a number of religious preachers, Muslim preachers, would say at the pulpit that the faithful had to punish the socialists because of gay marriage, which was anathema to them. And now it's far more split. But what we saw in the first round was that among people who said they were Muslim, they overwhelmingly voted for Jean-Luc Mélenchon, 37% of them, which is far more than the roughly a little less than 20 that he got in general elections for Hamon, but some also, 10% for François Fillon and 5% of them for Marine Le Pen.
Some of your peers argue that France's rigid secular society is allowing jihadism to thrive. This insistence on imposing cultural conformity on the population is itself becoming more and more diverse. Some say France would be better off with a more multicultural approach, like in Britain. Now, I know you disagree, and in fact you helped create the law which was passed in 2004, banning religious symbols and clothing in public schools. Why do you feel it's so important for France to retain strict state-sponsored secularism? And isn't there an argument for saying that France's efforts to keep things neutral have actually helped a large section of society to feel excluded?
Well, if it were the case, you would not have the attacks in Germany or in Britain. And the policemen in front of the Houses of Parliament in Westminster would not have been stabbed. There would have been no attacks in the Glasgow airport earlier on, and and they would not have witnessed the lorry or the truck running over the crowd in the Breitscheidplatz in Berlin on December 16th. So it's not an issue of secularism, and it's not an issue of being particularly strict, because French laïcité does not compel you to abandon your religion. On the contrary, it does tell you that it has no room in the public sphere as such. And the big issue for us now is to what extent what we have in common is more important than our differences, or the opposite. And, when you look at what is happening in some of the banlieues with Salafism, that is to say, this extreme understanding of Islam, this fundamentalist, if I may say so, understanding of Islam that considers that only Salafists are true Muslims. The others, the bad Muslims, are apostates, and their blood is licit, as they say in Arabic, damu halal. The rest of the population is infidel, kuffar, and they don't fare better. So when you have that, well, then you may wonder what society is going to become, and that jihadists actually, who thrive on the same ideological tenets as Salafists, i.e. what they call in Arabic the doctrine of al-wala' wal-bara'a, that is to say, allegiance to the scholars of Salafism, and disavowal, as they say, or total rejection of any other values. So this leads to a fracture in society that at the end of the day, and this is the jihadist's dream, will lead to civil strife and the sort of Balkanization or Lebanization, if you want, of European societies. And this is a big thing at stake, and I believe that multiculturalists did not really understand what they were up to, and that, you know, this was a byproduct of a sort of post-industrial society where you thought that you could juxtapose a number of communities as if communities were just neutral things. But there is a fight for survival, and if you have identity politics, it's much more complicated to deal with than when you have political communities, because you cannot change your identity, or people tell you that your identity is ascribed, and therefore either the other converts or he is out. And this is something which is a major threat for our societies today.
One last question. Your views have made you a target. Last year, after French-born jihadi Larossi Abdallah murdered a police officer and his wife in front of their 3-year-old son in Magnanville, he then streamed a video on Facebook Live claiming the attack and calling for the killing of 7 public figures. Now, your name appeared as one of the 7 figures. Now, has this changed the way you go about living your life and also your sense of personal security and generally your views?
Well, you know, it was not my views that were attacked. It was my scholarship. And I think that the reason I was top of the list was that, you know, when I, for instance, debate those issues, as I did in a French prison with jihadist inmates in France, or the whole community of inmates, the jihadists thought that they lost in front of me. And then they called Raqqa with their forbidden cell phone, said, this guy is dangerous because, you know, he knows what it's about. And, you know, I'm a strong believer in academia. And my scholarship is not normative. I mean, I may have my own views apart from that, but what those people want to prevent is the study of the phenomenon, is the reading of the text. Because, you know, I'm a man who does, a scholar who does fieldwork and who reads the text in Arabic and who makes the link between both. This is not something that happens that much, because many of people who say they are experts either have no fieldwork or do not read Arabic, or at times do neither. And as far as my life, well, of course, it's a constraint. But you know, when you've dedicated your life, your whole academic life, for more than 40 years to the studying of this phenomenon, I mean, this is not going to threaten me. I mean, an Orientalist is an animal with thick skin and cold blood, and here I am.
Gilles Kepel, thank you very much for joining us today on Live on Live.
My pleasure.